Hi everyone! Today's video is week 5 of fabric manipulation, and we are going to be talking about pleating, specifically double controlled pleats, set-in pleats, and partial pleats. We've done some pleating in some of our other videos, but this is more of an in-depth tutorial about pleating, and this diagram here is something I think that's really important for creating your pattern pieces for pleating projects. So this is kind of the anatomy of a pleat. It's showing you the pleat depth, the underfold, inner fold, outer fold, and the placement line. So I've made a 3-dimensional version of that diagram here because I think it's really important for planning out your pieces for your project. So you're going to want to figure out how much fabric you need to pleat down to create the shapes that you're looking for. So to develop that math, what you need to know is the pleat depth that you're looking for, which is going to be from the underside edge of the inner fold to the outer fold. And 2 times that is going to be the underfold. You're going to want to mark your placement line of where your outer fold will go to. So for creating your pattern pieces for your pleating, it's going to require a little bit of math. So there's this great formula in your book on page 91, and it's going to tell you that 2 times your pleat depth, which is here, is going to equal your underfold, which is going to be here. So 2 times of whatever your pleat depth is, which in this case is 2 inches, is going to be your underfold. So that will be 4 inches. Then 1 underfold times the number of pleats is going to equal the total amount of fabric for your underfolds. Then the total underfolds plus the target measurement of your fabric once it's pleated is going to equal your fabric requirement. So before you do your math, you're going to want to decide how your pleats will appear. So this is pleating that's been secured on both sides, double controlled pleating. And I have pressed along the middle of my pleats there so that they have a crease down the middle. And this is the same thing with the fabric unpressed, so it has a bit of a more of a rolled edge. And this one, I have done a top stitch right along my edge so that it is permanently creased. You can also do something where you are just lowering the release point of your pleat. You can also change the release point by doing some decorative stitching. This one here is called turned pleats. So you have one side of the pleat going one way, and then I've turned the other side down so that it gets a wave. And this is a draped pleat. So you kind of create your sections by steaming them in the direction that you want. Your book will show you several different examples, of course, of different things that you could do with your pleating. So this is dropping your release points so that you have a shape. This one here has some decorative stitching to drop those release points. This is an example here of the puffed or draped knife pleats, and then the turned knife pleats, and of course several other variations of different kinds of pleats. So next we're going to talk about partial pleats. This is when the top of the fabric is flat and then becomes pleated. So the book shows you here the little diagram of how the extension pleats work. So this is going to be your underlay, and these are going to be the pleat depths. And a 3-dimensional version of the pattern pieces look like this. They look a little bit like a fireplace or a steeple. And then this is going to be the piece that you put behind there if you are doing a box pleat. For a knife pleat with these, you are going to fold this section back and place it over the top of that section so that you have your space between your pleat. Your pleat is going to go behind, and that section will get stitched all together. The back will look like this. So you would stitch along this section here and down around the corner. If you were going to do a box pleat with these, the corners will become half of your underfold, and you will place them like so, and then your little piece will go onto the back here. So that section will get stitched together, and then you will stitch along the outer edges of those. So in the fabric, it will look like this. You'll do a little seam allowance around your pieces, and I will show you how to put those together. So I'm going to show you how to do one box pleat and one knife pleat with the extension pleats. So for a knife pleat, all I'm going to do is put right sides together of these two pattern pieces and stitch right along that line. And once I have that all stitched, I can press open my seam and it will create a little pocket there. Now I can press that line all the way down and put a crease there, or I can leave it unpressed and just press the top here. For the box pleat, the sewing is going to be slightly trickier, so what I'm going to want to do is stitch on my back piece first. So I'm going to stitch half of this on, starting at my point, and then I will stitch the other half to the other side, leaving the top free for now. So now that I have stitched both sides of my extension, I can fold that in half and stitch down to the point. And now I can open this up and press it flat. So I will press open my seam here and let this be flat and open. Line up my folds so that they're nice and straight. And as you can see, my little box pleat is inside of there. So those are extension pleats. Of course, if this is something that you're going to want to do with a free edge like this, you need to hem it like we've been doing in our ruffle videos. So you can choose to do any kind of hem that you would like, and your book talks a little bit more about how to hem things like that. So the last thing we're going to talk about is setting a piece of pleated fabric into a shape. So you can either have this bottom free, sort of similar to the pleats we've just done, where the outside is flat and the bottom you can see the pleating like a little door, or you can set it completely into a shape. The process is going to be the same. You're just going to either have a hemmed edge on the bottom, or you're going to put an edge all the way around. So to create a pattern for the pleating on the inside of this shape, you can use a piece of paper and just go ahead and pleat it into the shape that you want. And then you will trace that shape and then cut around the edge of that. And you want to mark where your placement lines are for your outer edges so that you don't get confused between the placement and where the space between your pleats can be. So once you have your shape cut out and you spread it out, that will be how your pattern piece looks. And you definitely want to make sure that you have marked everything and where your pleats need to go, because your shape can turn out looking pretty crazy. So we are going to put this on some fabric and pleat it back together. So I have drawn my seam allowance on here, and I have drawn little arrows that go from the edge of my pleat to the placement line. And you can do this obviously much more delicate. I just wanted you to be able to see it, but it's really helpful for you to be able to remember which direction you want to pleat in and which line goes to which. And since I have a pretty rough cut here of my shape, I'm just gonna keep my piece intact actually and do my pleating before I cut it out, and then I can cut my shape after it's pleated. And I'm going to do a stay stitch around the edge just so it's easier to sew in. So I have done my little top stitch, stay stitch right around the edge of my heart here, and I've done it in between my stitch line and the seam allowance just so that when I put it in it doesn't show. And then I have cut out my shape into my flat piece, and I have clipped the underside and pressed all of that back. Now depending on your shape, you could potentially put this in by putting right sides together like we did with the gathering set-in piece. However, you can also do it this way if you don't mind a top stitch showing. So now I'm going to just set this in. And I will pin it into place, and then I will top stitch around the edge. And you could also slip stitch it if you didn't want a top stitch to show. And this is what it looks like when it has been top stitched. So of course there's lots of other pleats and choices for designs that you can do for your pleating block. Just take a look into your book and see what else you're interested in. But that is going to be the video for double controlled pleats.